All right.
I'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, and if you want me to do a quick prayer, I will.
Okay, great. So Ryan, if you could cue the flag.
Delegate Bartlett, I believe Delegate Chang is in the waiting room.
Oh, right. Let's release him. We'll wait for him and admire our beautiful flag. He had, there were so many cars, I have to say, leaving at after 11 last night, and there were so many cars in the garage. There were many late nights. Delegate Chang, are you ready to do the Pledge of Allegiance and the prayer?
Yes, I am, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Please proceed.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and justice for all. In our appropriate posture, just reflect in prayer about all that we've been through, and just remember the work that we've done so far during this session and the work that we had before us. So if we could just take time to just reflect and pray in our own posture. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Chang. Good morning, everyone. We are a couple of days from crossover. There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, and we'll get there. Be encouraged. We'll get there. So I want to go over the agenda this morning. We have quite a bit on our agenda. We're going to move with a relative speed because, like I said, there's a lot going on behind and in front of the scenes. We have many subcommittees and many votes in our committees, and I want to make sure that you all have time for that. I want to give a couple of reminders and some new information. With respect to reminders, please note that amendments to bills that the delegation have approved need to come back. No, I'm sorry, bills in which the delegation has approved. If the bill is amended, all amendments need to come back to the delegation for review and for approval. That's important. Also, I wanted to explain to the public why we are not adhering to the 48-hour rule with respect to some of the changes that went on with our agenda and the votes that we have posted. And the reason for that is because the speaker lifted the 48-hour and the 24-hour rule due to crossover. Members, generally, we in committee, at least in my committee, we are not allowed a second bite of the apple. And I know you all know what I'm talking about. You have your question, you have your comments, you have your remarks once, and you don't get a second chance to make those. So please let's adhere to that during our delegation meeting this morning. Each presenter will have approximately 5 minutes. There is a timer for your, and I will kindly let you know when you have gone within your allotted time. With that said, this morning we have several guests. I don't see our senators. I know they will join us later, and when they do, I will announce them. But in the meantime, we have, I will present the guests I will introduce the guests as they are up on our agenda. So first item on our agenda is House Bill 843, which I will hold and move to the next item, which is HB 933, the Anne Arundel County transfer tax, which we have amendments for. Matt, Council, would you please explain the new amendments we have for House Bill 933?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. As we know, House Bill 933 allows the governing body of Anne Arundel County to increase a tax imposed for the transfer of real property over $1 million. The amendment exempts any increase to the tax rate imposed for a written instrument that is for a title of real property that provides affordable housing for moderate or low income individuals in the county, which includes the city of Annapolis.
Thank you. Are there any questions? We do have Mr. Pete Barron here today from the County Executive's Office if there are any questions. Seeing none, is there a motion? Mr. Chisholm, Delegate Chisholm.
Just for clarification, so if, let's say there's an affordable housing apartment complex and it's sold and transferred to another entity, they're exempt from anything above $1 million for this tax increase, is that correct? On that amendment?
No, Delegate. In fact, this amendment came up sort of to clarify what we had discussed in the intent of the bill. When a transfer occurs of affordable housing, they would still be subject to the transfer tax of the same rate that would be applied for any property under $1 million. So if that transfer was a $3 million affordable housing apartment building that is being transferred and will remain a affordable housing apartment, it would be subject to the current rate that you would pay for any property under $1 million. It just does not apply the surcharge to those properties.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move favorable on the amendments, and then we can go from there and then take any more questions if that's okay with you.
That is fine. Is there a second? It has been moved in second.
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved in second for favorable on the amendments, and let's continue with discussion. Delegate Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the amendment and in the bill, what is the time frame that the property has to remain affordable housing?
I do not believe there is a time frame. Mr. Barron, could you address that question?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question, Delegate. The intent is to leave that to the council. So this just clarifies what we thought the original intent of the bill. When drafted, we thought the council would have control of it. After the House hearing, there were some questions raised as to whether or not this was applicable to that the council would have the power to set the rules on this. So this would allow the council to set those rules. Usually these properties are subject to a LIHTC, low-income housing tax credit, or a grant from DHCD or a couple other federal programs which have timelines imposed.
So there's no MOU or legislative intent letter attached to the bill that outlines any time a time frame that the property has to remain affordable housing or had to be affordable housing prior to the sale to be exempt from this tax?
The county council
Yeah, but I'm talking about us. I'm talking about the bill before us today.
Again, this bill is
So
enabling
Yeah,
the county council to set that kind of control.
I understand what enabling legislation is. I've passed a lot of it. My question is there anything in this bill?
Delegate Howard, the answer is no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, are there any other questions? Seeing none. Oh, yeah, seeing none. And Delegate Howard, yeah, okay. So seeing none, we have a motion to move favorable on the amendment. Secretary, please call the roll.
Madam Chair, can I ask the legal counsel to please give me the amendment number?
You're muted, Matt.
As of right now, there is not a finalized amendment number, so I will provide that if this amendment is adopted.
Okay, thank you. So on House Bill 933 as amended, Vice Chairman Rogers,
Yes.
Delegate Bagnall,
Yes.
Delegate Barnes, Delegate Carey,
Yes.
Delegate Chang,
Yes.
Delegate Chisholm,
No.
Delegate Henson,
Yes.
Delegate Howard,
No.
Delegate Jones,
Yes.
Delegate Kipke,
No.
Delegate Lehman,
Yes.
Delegate Malone, Delegate Malone,
No.
Delegate Pena Melnick, Delegate Saab,
No.
Chairman Bartlett.
Yes.
Madam Chairman, the vote is 8-5 and the motion passes.
Thank you. Is there a motion on the bill as amended? That was on the amendment.
Move
Move the
favorable.
bill as amended.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to move the bill as amended. Are there any questions? Seeing none, Secretary, call the roll, please.
Vice Chairman Rogers,
Yes.
Delegate Bagnall,
Yes.
Delegate Barnes, Delegate Carey,
Yes.
Delegate Chang,
Yes.
Delegate Chisholm,
No.
Delegate Henson,
Yes.
Delegate Howard,
No.
Delegate Jones,
Yes.
Delegate Kipke,
No.
Delegate Lehman,
Yes.
Delegate Malone,
No.
Delegate Pena Melnick, Delegate Saab,
No.
Chairman Bartlett.
Yes.
Madam Chairman, the vote is 8-5 and the motion passes.
Thank you. And please send a letter of indicating the vote and the support for the amendment to the appropriate committee. Moving on to our first guest. Mr. Christopher Stevenson is here to speak to us about a bill that has been introduced in the House, House Bill 581, the Essential Workers Protection Act. Mr. Stevenson.
Madam Chair, thank you for having me on your agenda this morning. My name is Christopher Stevenson, and I'm the Senior Policy Analyst for 1199 SEIU, the largest healthcare union in America, with over 10,000 workers here in the state of Maryland. I'm here today to talk briefly about the Essential Workers Protection Act. For the past year, essential workers have risked their lives to look out for us, whether they are nurses, firefighters, bus drivers, or grocery workers. Many of them have become infected on the job, and too many of them are no longer with us. But the Essential Workers Protection Act is a way that we can tell these workers that we recognize their sacrifice for us. It contains common sense protections such as free testing, free PPE, worksite emergency plans, bereavement and quarantine leave, workplace safety standards, and hazard pay. Yet, this morning, you will hear a representative of the Maryland Hospital Association state that healthcare workers should be exempt from certain provisions, such as the right to refuse dangerous work. Yes, you heard me right. Your local hospital wants the workers who are the greatest risk of disease to have the least protections from the risk. Although our healthcare workers are heroes, they are not invincible. They require PPE just like you and I, and without any work site, including hospitals, becoming dangerous to continue their work, healthcare workers don't have the chance. When these instances occur, healthcare workers must have the right to refuse dangerous work because it not only puts nurses, doctors, and other healthcare workers at risk to contract COVID-19, but it creates the possibility of spreading the diseases to their families and community members. It is argued that healthcare workers may abandon their posts, But we must realize healthcare by nature is a field of cure, treatment, and mending of various ailments, not to run away from them. Our healthcare workers have proven themselves, have contracted COVID-19 multiple times, have donated time to each other just to quarantine, and have been tirelessly on the front lines without leaving or quitting. They signed up to be healthcare workers, but it should never be a death sentence. To date, over 8,113 Marylanders have died, including healthcare workers, from COVID-19. And while we rely on these heroes to keep us safe and healthy, they themselves need these same opportunities to protect their own lives, just like you and I. By supporting this legislation, it gives all essential workers a fighting chance to just be able to live through a pandemic. Between now and the end of session, you are going to vote on hundreds of bills, and while we are overly grateful for your effort and wisdom, it is apparent that few bills are as essential as the Essential Workers Protection Act. With respect, we ask for a full favorable report on this bill, and thank you, Madam Chair, for having me on your agenda this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. I appreciate you being here, and your testimony was half the time allotted. Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Stevenson regarding the Essential Workers Protection Act? Mr. Delegate Chisholm.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we all agree that the healthcare workers are essential and have played a very vital and important role in this. My concern is, and I saw this bill almost a month and a half ago, is everybody else that's listed. And I'm just going to give you an example: arborists, landscapers, automobile salesmen, exterminators, janitors, roofers, self-storage facilities, and some of the other language in here. And I don't know if this bill's been amended, but one of the things that stuck out to me, and I just want you to speak to some of the other people that are included and why it wasn't more targeted at just hospital workers or first responders. And we've lumped almost every industry into this. And then it says, if an agency determines that an emergency is occurring or has occurred, the agency shall announce publicly in writing that the emergency is occurring or has occurred. I worry deeply about being able to go backwards and having an agency determine whether an emergency happened or not. If we were just talking about first responders and it was an emergency that was declared nationally or locally or statewide, it would make more sense. But we seem to have thrown this wide net over every industry, and why we weren't just direct. I would have a lot more. I would have a better feeling about the bill if we didn't have this huge net of just about every worker out there that really wasn't essential. So did you help to craft the bill, or you just want to speak to, and I guess this is for whoever wants to answer. I don't know who drafted the bill. I think it was done in Delegate Davis's.
Let's give Mr. Stevenson a chance to answer.
Delegate Chisholm, that's a great question. The purpose and the intent of the bill is to cover as many essential workers that physically have to report to the work site. During this past, I don't know if you were able to attend the work group session that Chair Derek Davis put on between advocates and opposing members of this bill. We did come to the conclusion that the industries that were going to be covered in this bill would be the industries that the CDC recommends. And that's actually where we pulled this language from. So with that being said, Delegate Chisholm, we want to make sure that we cover all the workers, including the ones that you mentioned, from contracting COVID and spreading it through their community. We do understand that healthcare workers and grocery store workers and other workers are more liable and sometimes more susceptible to come in contact with COVID-19. But at the same time, any worker that has to go outside of their home to report to the work site, there's always a chance of contracting COVID-19.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate.
Delegate Lehman.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation, Mr. Stevenson. I was just curious. I think I heard you say there were 10,000 SEIU workers in the state of Maryland. Do you know how many there are in Anne Arundel in particular? And where is your biggest concentration of those workers? At which facility or facilities?
Delegate Lehman, that's a great question. I personally right now don't have the information about specifically how many are in Anne Arundel. I can get that information to you, of course. But our largest concentration is in Baltimore City.
Okay. Yeah, that would be useful if you could follow up with me on that. I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely, Delegate.
And thank you again for your presentation and to your frontline workers.
Thank
It's
you.
very, very much appreciated, their service and their sacrifice.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Delegate Howard.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I just want it noted for the record that I vehemently object to this testimony. This bill is in a work group. This bill is in a subcommittee on which I was on yesterday, which I'll be on today. This bill has been heavily amended, still has a lot of work to do on this bill. And I heavily object to the testimony and the information being talked about in this bill when, you know, we're talking about essential workers. That includes grocery store workers that can identify an unsafe work condition. We haven't even as a subcommittee identified what the turnaround time should be on an investigatory level as far as the AG is concerned. So essentially you would have a grocery store shut down for God knows how long because a worker has identified a potentially, maybe unsafe work condition. We haven't even in what could be a food desert. We haven't even identified a turnaround time as far as investigation and putting people back to work. And I highly protest and highly object to this testimony being brought forward to this committee today when this bill, which is critical, is being we're doing a lot of work on this bill. So I just want it noted for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your objection and I appreciate you noting it for the record. I would like to add that we have other people who have come to us to present on various matters. All matters are always before the House and always being worked on. And so, you know, when folks ask to come forward, unless they're hugely awful, I agree to let them come forward. And so, so I appreciate Mr. Stevenson for coming forward today and speaking. We will also have Brian Frazee from the Maryland Hospital Association who will be coming forward and speaking to us. With that said, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. I'm going to move on to our next presenter because I see no further hands raised. Thank you for being here. Our next presenter is Mr. Skip Auld, who we know and have had presentations from previously. He is from one of my favorite places. He's the Chief Executive Officer, the Anne Arundel County Public Library. And Mr. Auld, if you could just start your video.
Here we go.
Perfect.
Hello.
Perfect. Good to see you.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you. All righty. You have 5 minutes to let us know whatever you want to talk to us about.
Okay, so I'm going to share screen here. Just give me a moment, please. Now it's saying that the share screen is disabled. Is that true?
That is correct. But however, you are now a co-host and you should be able to share screen.
Okay, thank you so much. I guess we're all learning all kinds of technical matters these days.
That is
okay.
true.
Give me just a moment. Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. And I know I just have 5 minutes or probably 3.5 minutes now. So it's very, very good to see you all, and I appreciate the time. I just want to quickly give you an update on what's happening in the library system. You can be some of the first to know that we're going to have a full reopening on April 12th. About a week ago, we opened again for appointments. Our staff have been at work since June 1st last year. Most of our staff have been at the libraries and providing curbside service, virtual programs, just a number of different kinds of things. And we reinvented library service over this past year. So I'm going to go very quickly through this. I want to show you some photos of the new Michael E. Bush Annapolis Library, which of course was named for your former colleague and speaker, the great Mike Bush. So let me just quickly move through here. Right. Come on now. Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is just a quick timeline on. So again, I'm going to just move quickly through because I've talked a little about the things we're doing. Virtual programs like crazy, curbside pickup. We will gather books of, if somebody says they want like thrillers or mysteries or books set in England, we'll gather them a dozen or so books. This is at the rooftop at where the Discoveries Library is at Westfield Annapolis Mall. We've done sunset story times for months and months now and get them people spaced out and everything. We've created story walks in many of our libraries, take and make crafts from Smithsonian Environmental Research Center and all kinds of STEM activities we've had. This has been extremely popular in our libraries. We expanded the Chromebooks and Wi-Fi hotspots and created these kits to check out to people. We also added and enhanced Wi-Fi in parking lots at all of our libraries. I want you to know that we have two really great services from a company called BrainFuse. So Job Now, so people who need career assistance, help with applying. Our staff obviously help people constantly with online applications for jobs, but this source is great. And so there's Job Now, there's another one that's called Homework Help that many of you are aware of. This is 365 days a year from noon until midnight. You can get a trained certified teacher in any topic that's taught from kindergarten through community college. So I try to tout this whenever I can. Again, some of you may have children who could benefit from this. Some of you may have kids, for example, who need help with term papers, algebra, reading, everything. So customers are loving what we're doing. We do have customers anxious for us to be open, but we keep a customer log and we have hundreds of people really appreciating that we've been open as much as we have. So we had an opening of the Michael E. Bush Library on July 22nd. If you haven't been, I'd love to give you a tour. It is open for appointments now. And as I said, April 12th, it'll be open just for walk-ins from 10 a.m. until 7 p.m. weekdays, 10 to 5 Friday and Saturday, and 1 to 5 on Sunday. We have 8 of our libraries open on Sunday. So this is looking out toward West Street into the adult area. We call this the community living room. It truly doesn't give you a sense of the beauty and functionality and amazingness of it, but it is absolutely an amazing, wonderful library. This is looking toward what we call the Foundation Cafe over on the left side there by the entranceway, and this is looking from the children's area. The kind of puffy cloud-like lighting fixtures are kind of whimsical for the children's area, and we love that. This is the makerspace or Tinker Zone, looking there on the left over toward the teen area on the right. This is some of the computers in the teen area looking out toward West Street. Here is a plaque that is in the entranceway dedicated to your former colleague, Speaker Bush. And
Mr. Ault,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we are not seeing your screen. And
oh,
it
gosh.
sounds like you have some delightful pictures.
Oh my gosh. You're not seeing the screen. Oh my gosh.
So you did hit the share screen button?
I did. Let me try again here.
there should be a, when you do, it should say, that Skip Aldous is screen sharing.
Yeah.
There we go. There we go.
Oh my
There
God.
it is.
All right.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Well, I'm sure I've used up my 5 minutes.
Well, listen,
now.
would you just continue as you're going? You're going to share these with us by email, please, if you would send those to Sienna. And yes, and just if you could scroll through, because I could tell you were talking about some really great things.
Yeah, I will. I'll send that down, and I'm just going through real quickly to get you to that. This is the screen with Speaker Bush. God, I'm so embarrassed, but anyway, maybe next year we can do this in person. So at any rate, part of your, and as I said, reach out to me, anybody who would like a tour. If you'd like to have a joint tour of the delegation, I'd love to show you around. Some of you have been, I know, and we've given you tours, but our legislative priorities, first of all, you have passed the Building Lifelong Learners Act. This is historic library legislation, and it is tremendous. Not only is it providing this increase in the capital grant program, which has been so beneficial to us, including a $2.5 million grant toward the Riviera Beach Library. And we're looking to have a groundbreaking next Friday. Hopefully, we haven't heard back from everyone, but hopefully Delegate Minority Leader Kipke and Delegate Chisholm can attend. I know Senator Simon sent regrets and cannot be there. And Nathan Volke will be there, former library trustee. But the legislation is providing, it eliminates overdue fines for children and teens throughout the state of Maryland, which is really a tremendous benefit to people who need the libraries the most. We just recently eliminated overdue fines for all of our users. We had previously eliminated fines for children and teens, and doing it for everyone. This got 28,000 people back in the good graces of the library. Most of the debt that we had from those customers was pretty much uncollectible debt, and we always write off after 3 or 4 years. We do require people to return the books. If you don't return the books, you go back into that whole cycle of fines and being blocked from using the libraries. But the fact that the state has done this as well for kids and teens is really, really tremendous. This bill is quite valuable and important. As you may be able to see, libraries are pretty well price gouged on electronic books and audio books. We pay tremendously more than the consumer does. And we're in a big transition, obviously, for the last decade on how people read. A lot of people still read print, but a lot of people are checking out the digital books too. So this bill is very important, and I hope you're supporting it. And then finally, this Digital Connectivity Act, establishing the Office of Digital Inclusion, will be tremendously valuable. So with that, sorry for not having my presentation to you all, but I'm available for questions if you have a few moments.
Thank you very much. We appreciate having you here anytime. We appreciate the presentations and the slides. Thank you for giving us that. That was, the library is beautiful. The Michael E. Bush Library is absolutely beautiful. I've had a chance to tour it. So thank you for being here. We appreciate you.
So I do see some hands raised. So.
Yes, I see questions. I'm sorry, I don't know the order, so I'm going to go down my order. Delegate Dana Jones.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. And I have gushed before with Mr. Ald about how my family loves the library, and we spend a ton of our time there. And I just want to highlight that you all have done such an amazing job, and we are so appreciative of how you have switched gears during the pandemic and brought programming into people's homes and lives, and done virtual story hours and so many great things. I've been highlighting every week programs and sending it out in my email to folks because we are celebrating the 100 years of the Anne Arundel County Library. But you know, every year we get our summer reading challenge T-shirts and everything else. So you all have really just done a great job. I'm extremely appreciative. It's been such an asset to so many parents and so many constituents and friends that they can pull up on Facebook and have a wonderful story time. So, you know, parents can also juggle other things. So thank you so much for all that you're doing. And we cannot wait to be back in person. My family can't wait to be back in person again very soon.
Thank you, Delegate Jones. And it's all due to a great staff. We have something like 250 full-time, about 150 part-time, and they're innovative, creative. They are just wonders of the world. So thank you.
No, absolutely. They really are. And my son's been keeping a further list of book recommendations for you too. So.
Very good. Very good. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Old, I too want to, you know, offer laudatory remarks about the great things the library is doing, and also mention that, you know, we used a tour of the library that you just showed us as sort of a model to kind of help us with planning for the Severn Intergenerational Center, and found that to be very helpful. The ask, so, you know, first the comment and the remarks, then here comes the ask, and that's that you you know, sort of kind of be mindful of you know, the North County, and don't forget about us, you know, over on the west side, if you will. We're very much looking forward to, I know the Severn Library, there have been some updates to that, and would really appreciate the opportunity to highlight what some of that looks like as it's open, you know, post-COVID and that sort of thing, and just ask that you sort of kind of, and I know that you know, Brooklyn Park, you know, up there, we just want to make sure that we kind of keep an eye on our area as well. Thank you.
Delegate Rogers, thank you so much for that. I should, if I had more time, I would have highlighted Severn Library. We completed a renovation that was funded primarily by the Local Development Council from Maryland Live, which was tremendous. We got $1.2 million for that. And we opened it, I believe it was roughly last March the 12th, and we closed March 13th. So we haven't been able to really highlight that. This year, we have an ask to the Local Development Council for an outreach vehicle that will allow us to get into the communities of greatest need at Fort Meade Village and just all these different places, daycares, pre-Ks, Head Starts, all of that kind of thing. We're hoping to have at least 3 big events a week, reaching a few hundred people each week if that gets funded. And I should also point out the Glen Burnie Library. First of all, Riviera Beach will be opening sometime next summer or fall. Glen Burnie Library is in the capital plan. Roughly 2 years from now in FY24, we will start selecting an architect, and we'll have a great new library. And our pledge is to make it even better than the Michael E. Bush Library. So we're going to create that competition between the north and the south of the county. And following that, it looks like the county executive is recommending in year 6 of the capital plan, a new Millersville library, because the Glen Burnie Library serves double the number of people of all of our libraries. So it will be replaced with 2. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm happy to hear that. You're representing District 32. Delegate Saab.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a quick question on, you mentioned something that the library system gets gouged when they buy or when you purchase digital downloads. I guess if you can just expand a little bit on that. And also, does the library system have to pay the digital download tax that the legislator just implemented?
Well, on the last question, I'll have to look into that. It's not on my radar that we will have to pay that, but that is a possibility. But I will find out and let you know. In terms of the price gouging, the issue is that a consumer, for example, can buy an ebook for $9.99 or $14.99, or prices in that range. The same item costs libraries $80, $60. It goes for both ebook and the audiobook. And the issue really is that we're in this transformation of this ecosystem of the world of knowledge. For print materials, there was a Supreme Court case in 1906 that established what's called the first sale doctrine, which meant that a library could buy a book and it could loan it as much as it wanted until it wore out, or could just loan it out and there was nothing else. For ebooks, there's different models for the 6 primary big publishing companies. So there are models whereby you essentially can license a book at that higher cost for, sometimes it's for 26 checkouts and then you lose it. So you have to keep buying it. The essence in some ways is that we've moved from a world where we have always owned the books that we bought to where we now are renting them or licensing them. So it's partly that it's a new marketplace, but what this law will do is to state that if a company sells an ebook in the state of Maryland, they have to make it available to libraries at a reasonable cost. And so it doesn't define reason, so it gives some play. It's not attempting to sort of reverse the tables on the publishing company, because we very much are in a symbiotic relationship. We depend on them, they depend on us, at least in part, for revenues. But hopefully that gives you background that helps with my statement on the gouging.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Saab.
Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of quick comments and questions. Thank you so much, Mr. Auld, for your presentation. And I'm so glad we got to see at least a few pictures, because as you through this beautiful facility, I was trying to imagine it. I've seen it, of course, from the outside, and sounds wonderful. And what we saw of your pictures was great. I was just curious whether the architect of the library was Grimm and Parker, or who was the architect?
The architect was Wheeler Goodman Massick in Annapolis, WGM. Okay. And Ed Massick had worked with us along with Jeremy Klein. Jeremy was the project manager, and this was his first time to design a library. And when we were in the process of getting ready to select an architect, Ed came to me because he had done some work with us trying to look at site selection for that library and so on. He said, look, we don't have an architect who has that experience. And so I said, well, here's 6 names of architects that I know of that are really great library architects. He ended up selecting 2, Margaret Sullivan from New York City, who we had worked with on our strategic planning, or we worked later with her on our strategic planning, and Louis Cherry, who I had worked with when I was library director in Durham, North Carolina. And truly, it was the dream team of architects. Mm-hmm. Now, Revere Beach is being designed by Grimm and Parker, and they're a great company, and they've done a lot of libraries. I'm very interested in who will be able to select for the Glen Burnie Library when that comes up.
Okay, yeah, I thought it is a beautiful design, and Grimm and Parker designed the library in Laurel on the Prince George's side of my district, and won awards, won design awards and environmental awards, and they've also done beautiful work in Ellicott City. So I thought maybe they had a hand in it. But kudos to the architect. My other question was about whether, and by the way, I think you mentioned that the library opens, or the whole system opens, on April 12th.
Yes.
That sine die, so I don't think any of us will be doing library tours that day, but I really hope to see, especially the Michael Bush Library soon after. Are there Sunday hours at this or other Anne Arundel libraries?
Yeah, it is open 1 to 5 on Sundays, as are 8 of our libraries. So a lot of them actually on the west side are open on Sundays. Odenton, Severn, Maryland City at Russet, which is very close to Laurel, Crofton, Odenton, Glen Burnie. So we've got, but Bush Annapolis is open on Sundays.
Okay, great to hear. And thank you again for all that you do, for your enthusiasm and your passion and professionalism. And I think you should maybe consider enlisting Delegate Jones as an honorary spokeswoman. She's
That sounds great.
obviously very enthusiastic too.
Well, I thank you, Delegate Lehman, and I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for listening to at least half of the well, you listened to the whole thing as best I could give it, and we'll work that out differently next year. And we'll be in person next year, right?
We'll be in person next year. It'll be so good to see you in person. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you.
Thank
We're
you
gonna
so
move on
much.
to our next. I'm sorry. Did you have something?
No,
Okay.
just thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
We're going to move on to our next presenter, Hiram Birch. Mr. Birch has come and spoke to us before. He's a legislative manager with the Office of Policy Analysis, state, and he's going to talk to us about state aid to the county. Mr. Birch, thank you. Do you have a presentation for us this morning?
Yes, with me today is Arnold Aja. He is a graduate student at the University of Maryland, College Park, and he is also one of your legislative fellows. So he's actually going to do the presentation this morning. It may be a little bit over 5 minutes, but we are going to kind of keep this condensed. Okay, so
right, and it is my understanding, I did learn that we have granted you more time because of the intricate detail that you need to go into. So yes, please take 10 minutes.
Okay.
Mr. Aja, I do remember you and your presentation last year, so I'm looking forward to what you have to say. It's very interesting to see how the money flows within our county and with all the counties, quite frankly. So thank you. Thank you both for being here.
Okay, Arnold, you're up.
Good morning, Chair Bartlett and members of the Arundel County delegation. Can I please share my screen?
Oh, Mr. Aja, I'm sorry, you have a really bad connection. Can you start trying to share your screen and then we'll go from there? I want to see if that's going to work. If not, we might have to ask you to log back in. Okay.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, your audio is extremely bad.
Good morning, Chair Bartlett and members of the Arundel.
Yeah. You know what I would recommend, if you don't mind, could you perhaps come out and come back in, if that's okay, please, because I want to hear. We all want to hear, but we really can't hear you. Okay, and while he's doing that, I'm going to move to our next presenter, and then we'll have Mr. Aja come back. So our next presenter is Alice Estrada, President and CEO of Annapolis Maritime Museum and Park. Very good to see you. Thank you for being here. And please let us know, talk to us what you want. Let us know what you would like us to know.
Okay, well, I would like to share the screen if I'm allowed to do that.
You will be in just 1 second
Okay.
when staff makes you. You're a co-host. You are now a co-host, and you should be able to share screen.
All right, well, I so appreciate the time, and I will be brief and keep this to about 3 minutes, but really my objective today is just to really keep you up to date on what the Annapolis Maritime Museum and Park is doing and accomplishing, and in spite of this pandemic year. I will say we're a great example of a public-private partnership. Both the museum campus and the park campus are owned by the city of Annapolis. So it's been a very fruitful relationship. So let me do this. Quickly move through a few of these slides. Just so you know, in case you're not familiar, it's been a couple years since I've been before the delegation. Our mission is to educate youth and adults about Annapolis's rich maritime heritage, which it is rich, and the ecology of the Chesapeake Bay. We have some strategic priorities that I just was going to frame my presentation around. We embarked in a strategic plan in 2018 and had some, significant strategies and objectives to accomplish in that 3-year period. I will say, in spite of the pandemic, we're moving at a rapid pace. One of them was to transform the museum and park. And as you can see, the red roof here is our museum campus, what's known as McNaspy's. And then over there, if you can see the water tower, that's the park campus. So we are accomplishing that first with our McNasby campus, or our museum campus, with new exhibits. So the exhibits were supposed to open a year ago, April, and they will open this April. So we really were on pace to have them open, and then the brakes went on. We had difficulty getting the final fabrication and installation done. They've really been ready for several months now, really since the fall, but because of COVID, we've been kind of wondering, when and how we should open. We will be open this weekend rather, for Maryland Day, just for a few hours, and then we will be open to the public as of April 23rd. I wanted to show you some of the features of the exhibit. The delegation did fund a portion of this with a bond bill. And I think it was Delegate Howard who was very interested in us featuring the watermen, and we do a deep dive. So one thing you can do is get on a virtual boat ride with a waterman. So you'll put the headsets on, and it's way cooler with the headset. But you can also take a Wednesday night sailboat race with, a really great crew of women. And you can also do just a kayak through the tours of, through the creek, Spa Creek. The next one. So again, here's a part of our museum that really features on the oyster industry. That's a cannon that we have on loan from the State Archives from the Oyster Wars. Really just how we harvested oysters. And for those of you who don't know, McNasby's, where our museum is housed, was the last operating oyster packing plant in Annapolis. We have a big emphasis on the fragility of the bay and the Chesapeake Bay ecology. This is an aquarium that is before and after. And, really from the day that John Smith were here, where the oysters were the size of plates. And of course now, we also have been doing a huge emphasis on the preservation of maritime heritage. And I don't know if any of you knew Mike Myron, who really bequeathed us such a treasure trove of oral histories and photographs and archival information on our rich maritime history. But sadly, a lot of it was in awful shape. It was on cassette tapes, it was deteriorating. So we've been on a major campaign to preserve that and to collect more oral histories as we can.
If we don't preserve this is the family history, it's be gone and people won't forget. We need to remind people not to forget.
And that's Mike's voice there. The other was to transform the park. So we started by creating a master plan, and I just wanted to give you a progress report on where we are with the park. And as a reminder, this is what we inherited. This is why a public-private partnership is a good idea, because frankly, the city did not have the money to take care of the park. And we acquired it in 2016, and it was in really decrepit shape. I mean, syringes and beer bottles, and it's secluded. If you're not familiar, it's off of Edgewood Road. So this was a building on the park campus, and it was a waterworks building, a pump station from the 1934, I believe, and really quite a beautiful building with that slate roof, but full of boxes and snakeskins. Here it is today. We have converted it to our education center, and including 3 classrooms that we use. And we recently completed a stormwater management project out there with Maryland DNR. I will say there's a lot of more work to do. Again, this is all along the shores of Back Creek. And the project, it has some very serious runoff issues throughout. So we're trying to fix those one by one. We're also about creating unique outdoor learning spaces. And this was before the pandemic. We believe kids should be outside. Our programs are about outdoor education. And we also, to revitalize the park, subletted to Capital Stand-Up Paddleboard. They have brought a lot of vitality to what we call the west end of the park. So those future plans call for a pavilion, you know, not your run-of-the-mill rec and park pavilion, but a really spectacular pavilion with a fireplace. And we hope to use this not only for our education and maybe overnights for summer camp, but you know, obviously to use it for venue rentals and, you know, weddings and private events. That's a good source of revenue for us. And here is in a Deepwater dock is also we've got our plans submitted for that to house our normally one day soon. And another initiative is always to expand our reach and relevance. And we
Ms.
believe,
Estrada,
yeah,
could you kind of wrap up just a little bit?
I'll run through the slides then. So we're expanding our programs, including our education programs. We've adapted to COVID with our virtual programming and a school in nature. Other education programs are summer camps. Box of Rain has grown in leaps and bounds, and this is the program we do for our kids in public housing. And the city asked us to run a program for the Hispanic community, which we just launched in 2021. And Loma continues. She was able to sell last summer in 2020. And we have also been leveraging partnerships with that. Wanted you to know though, that just real quickly, we have fared okay through COVID. And we really lost every revenue stream from programs and field trips to weddings. But in the end, we received our fair share of rescue grants, and our donors who could give, did give, and gave more. So we're okay, and we're poised to assimilate back to a new normal any day now. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you for being here. I hope you will share that awesome presentation with us, because it was really good. And I hope we get a chance to.
You're all invited. I will send
yes,
out
I hope this interim. I hope this interim is a totally different interim, and we actually have time to go and you know, and look at the museum and park, because it looks.
Well, when you resume to in-person meetings, if you want to have it over there at the museum anytime, we have a wonderful bay room where you can set up the meeting, and then you could enjoy the exhibits afterwards, or a sale on Loma Lake.
Yeah, that's something to consider. I see a question or comment from Delegate Bagnall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it really is more of a comment, but Mrs. Strada, your passion and enthusiasm is just infectious. And I really appreciate the work that the Maritime Museum does, preserving our maritime history, because it is so ingrained in the DNA of Maryland. And I was fortunate to actually just walk through the park about a week ago. So as we're doing the tour, I was sort of reliving all of this. And I just wanted to ask a little bit more about the virtual tours, because that sounds like a really great initiative, especially for so many of us who grew up on the water. And, you know, we always pictured ourselves going out, you know, on the oyster boats and having boats, and the reality of that is far and away from the fantasy.
Yes, well, and exactly, most people that come to Annapolis don't really get on the water. They don't get to go on a boat ride. I mean, there are options, you know, we're trying to fix that, where there's options, affordable options to get on the water. But yes, the virtual reality experience is, you know, definitely as if you're there. You know, you look around with the headsets, and, you know, you see the top of the mast or whatever. But we also have virtual experiences on our website in our library, but they're not as 3D and as cool as that.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much for this kind
We
word.
appreciate you being here today, and thank you for all the good things that you all are doing to help with just space and education and just you know, getting us out there on the water when you can, and at least near the water. I'm going to move back. I'm going to revert back to Hiram Birch and to Arnold Aja. And I have a feeling that they've worked out the kinks of the audio in some fashion.
Arnold?
Good morning, Chair Bartlett.
There we go.
Arundel
Much better.
County delegation. I apologize for the technical difficulties. For this briefing, I will direct your attention to the overview of State Aid to Local Governments report. On page 4, you can see that Anne Arundel County will receive $586.9 million in state aid in fiscal 2022. Of this amount,
can someone advance to page 4? There we go. Thank you.
on page 4, you can see that Anne Arundel County will receive $586.9 million in state aid in fiscal 2022. Of this amount, $512.6 million is direct aid and $74.3 million is for retirement payments. The county will also receive $46.9 million in county municipal aid and $2.6 million in local library aid. In total, Anne Arundel County will receive a 3.2% increase in state funding in fiscal 2022, with total state aid increasing by $18.2 million over the prior year. Direct aid increases by $13.6 million, while retirement payments increase by $4.7 million. Page 6 shows the annual change. Page 7 shows the percentage increase. Turning to page 8, the state budget as proposed by the governor includes a $30.9 million in reductions to state aid programs and local cost share arrangements. The Anne Arundel County share of these reductions total $3.4 million. The budget plan includes a $26.6 million reduction to the Senator Cade Community College formula, of which $2.7 million would come from the Anne Arundel Community College. The budget plan also includes a $3.9 million increase in the local share of the Department of Assessment and Taxation's administrative costs, with the local share increasing from 50 to 60%. Anne Arundel County would be required to pay an additional $378,000 in fiscal 2022. The proposal will raise the local share to 90% by fiscal 2025, resulting in an additional $15.8 million local costs statewide. The additional costs for Anne Arundel County will total $1.5 million. The Annapolis City Pilot Grant is reduced by $383,000. The proposed state budget only includes $367,000 for the grant instead of the required $750,000 adjusted for inflation. General Assembly approval is required before these approvals can take effect, and the House Appropriations Committee has already rejected all 3 of these recommendations. Moving on to some of the major aid programs to county and municipal governments. On page 12, you can see that Anne Arundel County will receive $9.1 million in funding under the police aid formula, a slight increase from the prior year. Page 15 shows the fire and rescue aid. Anne Arundel County will receive $1 million in fire and rescue aid in fiscal 2022. Each county's funding is based on their share of property tax accounts relative to the statewide total. Each county is guaranteed a minimum 2% share of total funds, or $300,000. On page 16, you can see that Anne Arundel County will receive $4.9 million in local health grants in fiscal 2022. Statewide, local health departments will receive $65.8 million, which represents a $4.4 million increase from the prior year. Page 19 shows the highway user revenues for fiscal 2022. Legislation enacted in 2018 required the state to provide capital transportation grants to local governments based on the amount of revenue allocated to the gasoline and motor vehicle revenue account. The local share will total 13.5% in fiscal 2020 to 2024. Baltimore City receives 8.3%, county governments receive 3.2%, and municipal governments receive 2%. The county and municipal share is based on road mileage and vehicle registration. In fiscal 2022, the Anne Arundel County government will receive $6.5 million, and the city of Annapolis will receive $1.6 million. Page 25 shows the gaming impact grants. Anne Arundel County will receive $28.3 million in gaming impact aid in fiscal 2022. Funding for Anne Arundel County continues to be affected by the Hold Harmless grant, which will total approximately $3.9 million in fiscal 2022. The Hold Harmless grant is based on the amount of impact aid Anne Arundel County received through video lottery terminals in fiscal 2016, which represents the year before the Prince George's County Casino opened. The Hold Harmless grant is taken out of the formula amount for Prince George's County. We will now shift our focus to education aid. Moving on to page 27, over 80% of state aid to Anne Arundel County will go to public schools. The Anne Arundel County Public School System will receive $424.7 million in direct aid in fiscal 2022. In addition, the state will provide $67.6 million in funding for teacher retirement payments. On a per pupil basis, Anne Arundel County will receive $6,076 in state funding, $5,242 per pupil in direct aid, and $834 per pupil for teacher retirement payments. Anne Arundel County ranks 22nd in the amount of direct per pupil state support for public schools. As shown on page 28, in terms of year-over-year funding enhancements, Anne Arundel County will receive a 4.5% increase in direct per pupil support for public schools. Moving on to page 33, several factors, including student enrollment and local wealth, help to explain the level of state education aid for Anne Arundel County. However, due to the sharp decline in student enrollment this year resulting from the COVID pandemic and the implementation of online instruction, the governor has provided $213.7 million in Hold Harmless grants under the Blueprint Fund to offset the anticipated decreases in education formula aid resulting from lower student enrollment. Anne Arundel County will receive $2 million in Hold Harmless grants, and these grants will fully offset the projected decrease in state education formula aid resulting from lower student enrollment counts. Moving back to page 32, Anne Arundel County will also receive $26.5 million in additional state funding under the Blueprint initiatives in fiscal 2022. This includes $10.8 million for supplemental instruction and $3 million in concentration of poverty grants. The school system will receive $3 million for full-day pre-kindergarten and will be eligible to receive additional funding for early childhood expansion programs. Turning to page 34, a considerable amount of state education funding is based on targeted student populations, with Anne Arundel County receiving $115.2 million in targeted grants under the compensatory aid, English language learners, and special education programs. On page 35, you can see that Anne Arundel County has the 17th highest targeted student index in the state at 52.2%. This index adds together the percent share of full-time equivalent students who are approved for free and reduced price meals, English language learners, and special education services. The targeted student index ranges from 29.1% in Carroll County to 113.5% in Baltimore City, with the statewide average at 63.7%. We will now focus our attention to student enrollment. As seen on page 43, the full-time equivalent student enrollment count decreases by 1.8% in Anne Arundel County compared to the statewide average decrease of 2.3%. This growth rate results in 1,470 fewer students for the Anne Arundel County public school system. Currently, the county school system accounts for approximately 9.5% of students statewide. Turning to page 44, the number of students approved for free and reduced price meals increases by 0.7% in Anne Arundel County compared to the statewide average decrease of 6.7%. Anne Arundel County currently has the 16th highest percentage of students approved for free and reduced price meals at 32.2% of total student enrollment. Page 45, Anne Arundel County has the 8th highest percentage of students identified as English language learners at 8.1% of student enrollment. In fiscal 2022, the number of English language learner students decreases by 0.8%, resulting in a stable number of students requiring language services. Page 46, Anne Arundel County has a relatively lower share of students receiving special education services. In fiscal 2022, the number of students receiving special education services accounts for 11.9% of total enrollment, compared to the statewide average of 12.8%. On page 47, statewide public school enrollment represents 14.1% of the total state population. In Anne Arundel County, public school enrollment represents 14% of the overall county population, which is the 13th highest in the state. Public school enrollment has a share of total county population ranges from 8.9% in Kent County to 17.1% in Howard County. Finally, we are going to focus on local wealth. Moving back to page 40, you see that Anne Arundel County has the 5th highest per pupil wealth measure in the state at 122.5% of the statewide average. The local wealth measure is a combination of property wealth as measured by county assessable base and income wealth as measured by net taxable income. In terms of local property wealth, Anne Arundel County is ranked 7th in per pupil wealth at 125.8% of the statewide average. In terms of local income wealth, Anne Arundel County has the 5th highest per pupil wealth at 116.8% of the statewide average. Around 70% of state aid is allocated based on local wealth, and this explains the relatively modest level of state funding provided to Anne Arundel County through the state aid formulas. And this concludes the briefing, and while this presentation touched on some of the highlights, please feel free to contact us if you would like additional information. Now we will open it up for any questions.
Thank you. Awesome. I absolutely love it. And I want to get in and dive in and actually study it more. And I will have questions. I'm sure other members will have questions as well. I don't see any questions at the moment or any comments. That's probably because we're still absorbing.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes, please.
There's been a considerable amount of additional federal support that has been allocated to local governments, and there's been additional support provided in the governor's supplemental budgets that has not been included in this. So Anne Arundel County will be receiving a significant more level of funding than you see here, and you will see that at the end of session in our final session reports. So the good news is that all of the funding formulas have been funded, and it seems like at least through the House that these proposed reductions have been rejected. So it looks like Anne Arundel County will receive their full statutory funding, and in addition, there will be additional state and federal funding coming to provide additional assistance.
That's great news. Love to hear it. And in fact, we may ask for follow-up to that effect if we don't receive it by email. But that would be good to have that follow-up.
And Arnold's speaking points today, we do have them prepared. And so we will be sending them to your offices later today. So all of his comments, we do have documented, and you will get that later today.
Thank you, as well as the report itself.
Yes, I mean, hopefully you should have gotten the report.
Well, I might have.
Yeah, so I
might have.
Right, but all of that information we do have, and it's posted on our website. And I think we have sent your staff a reference guide so we can show you how to access our reports electronically.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We appreciate the work that you do. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our last speaker will be Brian Frazee from MHA, and he is going to give us a few words on Essential Workers Protection Act, House Bill 581. Hi, good to see you, Mr. Frazee. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Good to see you as well, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone, members of the delegation. As the chair said, my name is Brian Frazee, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here on behalf of the Maryland Hospital Association to discuss the Essential Workers Protection Act. When the COVID-19 pandemic first took hold last March, the hospital field moved quickly to add roughly 6,000 beds in just a few months and created much needed space for surge capacity. Our members tested hundreds of thousands of community members, patients, and staff. We shored up supplies of scarce protective gear to keep patients and their workforce safe. And as soon as vaccines were made available in December, hospitals stepped up to support one of the most ambitious vaccination efforts in our country's history, prioritizing the vaccination of their healthcare workers and staff. And all of this was done while continuing to care for patients during multiple surges. And none of it would have been possible without the dedication of the more than 117,000 caregivers in Maryland's hospitals who have rightly been celebrated as heroes. And it goes without saying that hospitals' top priority throughout the pandemic has been the safety and well-being of their workforce. And this is demonstrated in the way that hospitals went to extraordinary lengths at the beginning of the pandemic in particular to ensure access to the most needed supplies as global supply chains for personal protective equipment shut down. Our members quickly mobilized to deploy creative strategies, working with local vendors that could pivot production to these vital items, partnering with other hospitals to increase purchasing power, seeking overseas vendors, and even producing their own PPE. We had hospital executives who drove to New Jersey to pick up shipments of PPE at a loading dock out of fear that they would be rerouted by FEMA if they went through normal delivery chains. And I'll tell you, in a survey of MHA members, Anne Arundel Medical Center listed their early actions to procure and stockpile PPE as one of their successes. And these decisions were not made because of legislation. They were made because we prioritize the safety of our staff and the patients that they care for. I do want to take this opportunity to respond to the comment that the representative from SEIU mentioned at the top of your agenda regarding right to refuse work. Hospitals are required to follow CDC guidance regarding PPE, and hospital staff are highly trained in infection prevention and safety. And at all times, hospital procedures and protocols have looked to the science and prioritized the safety of our staff and the patients that they care for. And the bottom line on the right to refuse provision in the bill is that the ability to subjectively determine that you will refuse work in a healthcare setting means that you are abandoning the duty of care and compromising patient safety. And this is simply not feasible in a health or a long-term care environment. I'll conclude by saying that the health and long-term care industry bring a unique and important perspective to this critically important issue. MHA has been working with several other health and long-term care organizations, including the Maryland Association of Community Services, the ARC Maryland, Lifespan Network, Hospice and Palliative Care Network, Leading Age Maryland, the Maryland Association of Adult Day Services, and the Maryland National Capital Home Care Association on proposed amendments to the Essential Workers Protection Act. I know I speak for all of my colleagues in these industries when I say that our essential workers are the backbone of the state's response to COVID. We look forward to continuing working with the House Economic Matters Committee, as well as the rest of the General Assembly, as you all consider how to move forward with this issue. Thank you again, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to present this morning.
Thank you very much for being here, and we appreciate the work that the essential workers have done. You know, COVID no one ever thought we'd be a year plus with COVID, but here we are. And I think, you know, everybody's doing an extraordinary job, especially our essential workers. The Vice Chair.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I really just wanted to echo those comments. We really appreciate all the great things that our healthcare workers have done, and appreciate you providing the education and update, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Frazee, for being here.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
So that concludes our agenda today. I see no hands raised for any further discussion. So with that, we are adjourned. Have a great day.